Pray with me. Lord, may the words of my mouth and the meditations of our hearts be acceptable in your sight. O Lord, our strength and our Redeemer. Amen. You may be seated. Today's sermon is brought to you through the eyes of the servant girl who recognized Peter as being Jesus' disciple. I have made up her name. It's Abigail for today. The setting is the courtyard of the high priest's house around the fire. I don't know what I'm supposed to be feeling right now. My life is shattered, and I can tell you that I will never be the same again after what I have witnessed today. The ache in my heart at the double dealing and the deceitfulness of the priests and those big wigs in Jerusalem, it's almost unbearable. Had they not paid attention to the Arab rejoicing, not just a week ago, when Jesus rode into the city on that donkey? See, the crowd was filled with excitement, anticipation, and hope. Everyone was attracted to the festivity. The air was electric. And those religious leaders couldn't have done anything to Jesus without being directly responsible for any kind of rioting that would have occurred, especially among people like me, the faithful Jews. Now, the Roman authorities, they couldn't be bothered by this two-bit player, but our Jewish leaders, they were definitely bothered by Jesus' bold statements. Our Messiah had finally shown up in the holy city, and people couldn't have put a lid on their big hopes. Now, I just knew it would be Jesus of Nazareth after all, because I had heard so much about him. Everyone acted like he was a celebrity. He was famous. Everybody wanted to be in this crowd, shouting, jumping, tears of joy. I was there even though I was working that day in the high priest's house. Thankfully, I needed to step out to run an errand, and then I got swept up in the jubilation. Jesus was mobbed, although he himself seemed rather calm, subdued even. But it was his countenance, more than anything else, that has seared itself on my memory. He appeared so resolute, so determined. See, there was this big, frantic crowd ready to get close to Jesus, as if the palm waving and the shouting would make their hopes even more real, more concrete. They had their coats scattered on the road, and he got that palm branch routine. Oh, yes, palm branches were everywhere, ready to poke your eye out if you weren't careful. That's because we were packed in like little fishes. I hate being short sometimes. Do you know, I'm starting to be convinced that we have in Jesus an extraordinary person being called to an extraordinary task. You know, I really hate the Romans, but I hate Herod even more because he's working with them to keep power. See, I have friends who would never themselves personally wield a sword, but their eyes glisten with excitement whenever there are stories that are shared about the rabble-rousers in town. I know where their hope lies. It is in complete political change. Now, I don't blame them one bit, but I would say Jesus put on a disappointing show. Their expectations that he would ride into Jerusalem on a war horse, in a chariot, that was shot down. They were always quoting this verse in Jeremiah that talks about the kings and the princes who will enter the gates of the city, and they will be riding on chariots and horses, and So when Jesus showed up here and he's riding a donkey, I mean, the whispers around that group, well, it was more like grumbling, it was. They thought Jesus looked weak. They looked at him to project strength, to have a vision of how to conquer those Romans. But they left feeling seriously disappointed. No question in my mind. Undoubtedly now, Jesus won't be able to bounce back. He's been arrested. He does appear weak. And I would guess that among his zealot followers that he's lost his chance to conquer those Romans. He did not project strength. It's true. But I think he's up to something far more deep, far more reaching, something more in line with the ancient prophet Isaiah from the suffering servant passage. And it's funny, just last week in the synagogue, the leader read from Isaiah chapter 52 and 53. See, this man that we are waiting for, he's not going to be accepted at first. He's going to be despised. He's going to be not esteemed. He would be rejected by men just like the religious leaders are rejecting Jesus of Nazareth. He sounds like a woeful creature, since he will be a man of sorrows and acquainted with grief. See, the truth is, we have been waiting a long time for the right kind of ruler who will recognize God as the king. And that's the way it was meant to be. See, history tells us that even after being exiled and then allowed to return to our land, we're actually still in exile, really. We have been waiting for three things: the day that God is the king, the temple being fully restored, and the Torah completely followed. We're not there yet. We have been waiting for God to act decisively, to put down our enemies. I suspect we're going to need more patience and some kind of a deeper hope. See, the temptation to be skeptical and cynical, I get that. That's where I could easily go, but I'm not. See, I think God does things in unexpected ways. Although Jesus may appear weak, that doesn't mean he can't accomplish something great. Now, I didn't mean to bring trouble on that dude, one of his disciples calling him out. Now, I actually admire him. He had an opportunity to be around Jesus. He would be able to know, is Jesus the Messiah? Is he really the one? So I didn't mean to bring trouble on him. He would know. This week started out in triumph, but it has ended in catastrophe. See, I even heard whisperings among the people that they're planning to stir up the crowd to ask to crucify our Messiah. That kind of news is almost unbearable. I can't take it. And although he may appear to be weak, God is on the side of Jesus. I am sure of that. In fact, today I am ready to expect anything from our God. I'm ready to trust Jesus, who himself is the humble and obedient one, maybe even obedient to the point of death, even death on the cross. It could happen. I saw Jesus' face, and he looks determined to live beyond our small understandings. But now Jesus has been arrested, and he has not opened his mouth in defense. He kind of reminds me of the lamb that's being led to the slaughter. Passive, but going willingly, silently. Why would he not fight them? Could it possibly be the will of the Lord to crush him, as in literally? I am shocked and devastated, and maybe Jesus knows something that we don't know. I was told that when Jesus approached Jerusalem, he wept over it, saying, "Would that today you knew the things that make for peace." Why would Jesus cry for us? Is he that woeful creature, the man of sorrows and acquainted with grief? Your tears and mine, well, they're often sentimental most of the time, not all of the time. But see, the tears of Jesus are wrung out of God's inmost heart of yearning and compassion. See, the Messiah weeps for the sin that brings him to Jerusalem to die for her redemption. It is our complicity in sin that brings him here. It is our sin that he bears away from us, like the scapegoat going into the wilderness. He weeps for you and he weeps for me. I am sure of that. The Lord will lay on him the iniquity of us all when his soul makes an offering for guilt, our guilt. I'm too distraught by this turn of events. And I'm not in a position of power or influence to even try to change the minds of our leaders. If I could, I would. All I can do is to contemplate and wait and hope that this Jesus will accomplish the purpose for which he was sent. That is enough. It has to be enough. I know not what else I should do, so I surrender.